Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Kevan Chandler, who is a best-selling author and the founder of a nonprofit organization called We Carry Kevan. He speaks worldwide about his life with a disability and how community and creativity are the keys to true accessibility. Kevan and his wife, Katie, love being together, growing vegetables, and reading to each other. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And as many people who listen know, we pray before we get started. So I can't wait to see where God is going to take us. Also, as many people who listen know, sometimes it's a really long time between when I have my pre-recording call with someone and when we actually record, as is the case today. And so I am certain there are going to be new things that happen in our lives that hadn't yet occurred when we talked the first time that will be pivotal in this conversation. So I'm excited, and I love how God works in that way. He is so good. I also want to just remind everyone that I do things a little differently here. We like to start in the beginning and look from every guest's childhood all the way up to what they're doing now. It's just such a beautiful, organic, wonderful way to see that in every single story, unique as they all are, God is always the same. And so we have a lot of listeners who don't yet go to church or don't read the Bible, but they listen to the stories and they're beginning to see that consistency of character that God has throughout all of time with all of his kids. So with all of that in mind, Kevan, would you be willing to tell us a little about your childhood?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in North Carolina. I'm the youngest of three, and my sister and I were both diagnosed when we were very young with a neuromuscular disease called spinal muscular atrophy, which basically just means that the message from my brain to my spinal cord to tell my muscles what to do, it doesn't communicate that great, and so my muscles grow weaker over time, and so I'm reliant on a wheelchair. I have been since I was a kid. I was never able to walk, and yet we grew up in a home that was full of creativity and imagination and tenacity. and we used that word before the call.
Yeah.
But just this sense of what do you want to do and what are you practically able to do? Now let's push the envelope on that and get to making those dreams happen. And sometimes those dreams were bigger things, and sometimes it was just day-to-day things. But really, my parents raised us uh, like normal everyday kids, and they, we were in public school in normal classes, and we went to church and youth camp and missions trips, and played on a soccer team. And
Wow.
when the kids got too big, I started assistant coaching because figured it wasn't a good idea for them to run into me on the field. So that changed over time. But again, that's kind of an example of like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be involved in a soccer team? Great. You can't. play on the field, but you could help and coach and stuff.
Yeah.
So just kind of finding creative ways of doing things, but also our parents our home really had an open door policy. We had friends coming and going all the time, whether it was friends of ours from school or church or my parents' friends, would come over as well. And what that led to was that not only we were out in the world um, and showing the world kind of what our life with a disability looked like, but the world was coming into our home and seeing what it looked like as well. And
Yeah.
and so
I love how your parents did such a good job of involving you in everything, of
yeah,
giving you exposure to a very normal life, because honestly, I think that's the way it should be. I don't really understand. I honestly, anyone I've known that's had any type of disability, I feel like God has given them this unique perspective and
mm,
something to offer the world that wouldn't be offered otherwise. And it's honestly, I think, sometimes there's a benefit to being without something because you learn how to use other parts of who you are. And I say that not being somebody that has grown up that way, but having had my first conversation with you and having read your book and now, entering into this podcast, I want people to be thinking about the fact that I think sometimes we are doing ourselves a disservice because we're not getting to get the fullness of what God has for us from everyone.
yeah, yeah, and I think it goes both ways of the what we get to offer the world as far as a different perspective and what we get to take in, and that was a big part of childhood. As I look back, I'm 39 now, and, and there's this I'm just as I look back, I'm realizing um, that the way my parents did things, even though it was a lot of work, it was a lot of hard work to um,
Yeah.
take us to, take my dad to take me to father-son camp because he had to also dress me and bathe me and,
Yeah.
and do all of that as well at the camp. And um,
Hmm.
there was a lot of work involved, and but my parents stuck to it and invited people into our home, even though it would be easier to just shutter the
Yeah.
windows and have a kind of quiet, closed-in life. But as a result, as an adult, I get to um, really benefit from that because I know how to interact with the disabled world and the able-bodied world, and
Yeah.
I've gotten to see how the Lord uses that, and I pray that He continues to do so, using me
Yeah.
kind of as a bridge in that conversation. And so, yeah, I'm just really thankful for that, and my all three of us siblings have grown up to be storytellers and writers and doing creative things. My brother is involved with theater and illustrates books, and I obviously write books, and we'll get to that in a bit. And
Yeah.
my sister does too, and so yeah, it's just cool to see how my parents, like you said, they didn't just help us survive or get by, but really we got to thrive and grow and
Yeah.
experience the world in a very whole and full way.
Yeah, and I also hear that from the beginning, and you and I talked a lot about community in our pre-recording call, and I know we're going to talk about it again in the future, but um, we talked a lot about community and how that's what we were created for. And hearing that all three of you were in some way creative and storytellers, it's a direct overflow of having that community interacting. It's kind of like a beehive, this constant, everyone's doing something, but you're all doing something together, and it
Mm,
all has this ultimate purpose, right? And a lot of people, unfortunately, nowadays feel like they're so connected because of technology, but I always say it's kind of like bubble wrap. I see these people walking around like looking down at their screens, right? And
Mhm.
everybody's, and it's like bubble wrap. You can see everything around you, but it's so insular. You're so cut off from everything. It's really that I think we've disconnected, not that we've connected. And so it's beautiful to hear that you had that from the beginning. And as your
Mhm.
story unfolds, you've always had community. You've had people show up for you and you've shown up for them. And one man in particular you told me about, I don't want to skip over. There was a man at church named Marty that you told me about who had spina bifida, and he was the first adult that you had ever seen in a wheelchair. But he had a job. He was married. He was joyful. You said he lived this very full, abundant life. And like, how do you think his life was an encouragement to you?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I recognized it at the time. He was uh just another guy at church, and
Yeah.
we would race the halls and we'd um talk and hang out. And he was, I mean, if I was in middle school, he was probably in his late 20s or mid 20s. Um, so it was, I could we could relate to each other to some extent, but it was really uh I think it planted seeds in the back of my mind, maybe subconsciously, that, here's this guy who, like you said, he's married. Uh and not only did he have a job, but he was the security guard at it was Belk or Sears or something like that at the mall. Like he was a security guard,
Yeah.
and he's in a wheelchair, and
Yeah.
that's absurd, and in some minds, but he did it, and he did it well, and he also played wheelchair basketball,
Hmm.
which we got to go and see him play, and so that was
Wow.
cool to see. um and that gave me more context for more guys that are out kind of living their lives to the fullest, and like you said, just the joy that he had. I think that really uh planted seeds of possibility for me,
Yeah.
that I'm really grateful for. And actually, he and his wife adopted, and Marty has since passed away, but I got to see his wife this summer, and their daughter was just about to get married, and
Wow.
so yeah, just to then see, like, oh, this guy also has a legacy, of a family
Yeah.
that's going on, and as well as his influence on my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And honestly, I love in every story to see God always peppers in people
Mm,
intentionally. Um, and it's just so wonderful to see. I mean, you had a really great family life. Not everyone has that. And in many
mm,
cases, we see God pepper people in because they don't have some of the things that they need at home. But God peppered in some really beautiful people around you to make sure that you knew you could be exactly who you were made to be. You also told me about you had some peers who were in wheelchairs and
mm,
you had this really well-rounded experience. And already, just in as much as we've talked so far, anyone can hear it that you had a really good idea of the fact that there were endless possibilities. And that's how everyone should feel.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there was a balance there, that I needed, where I did get to see Marty as an adult, and then I also saw peers, whether they were my age or my sister's age, and also just growing up with my sister being 3 years older than me, like, really getting um, to see that full scope of
Yeah,
people with disabilities, and having people that I could say, oh man, today today my arms aren't working great, and they're like, I
yeah,
know, and I know that they do. I
yeah,
remember having a a conversation with one of my peers. He had a similar disease to what I have, and I think he brought it up, but he looked at me with a kind of a cheeky smirk one day and said, "Who do you think has bigger bones?" And like most kids talk about, I've got a bigger muscle than you, but we
Right,
knew we
right.
didn't have muscles, so we talked about who had bigger bones,
I love that.
and so yeah, you
Yeah,
just get to be a kid, and in
yeah,
the way that you are, and then at the same time, like I said, uh being at the public school and being in youth group, and um I had able-bodied friends kind of mixed in there as well, and
yeah,
my two best friends that I grew up with, and we're still best friends, and uh, all through high school and college, we played in a band, a punk rock band together, and went on tour and everything. And so, getting to have that kind of experience as well. I'm just really, well, I guess the show is about gratitude, so I'm really
yeah.
grateful for those different uh aspects of life that I got to drink fully from.
Yeah, and let's put a pin right there because you had told me when we had talked before that it was because you had broken your arm and you couldn't do as much in middle school that you actually got introduced to punk rock and ska. And so, here's a perfect little example of how God takes something that could be seen as negative and uses it for good and works it towards this is something that you found out that you loved and you were able to do. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I had been into some sports, and as I got into middle school, uh, a friend of my brother's, so maybe 5 or 6 years older than me, introduced me to a Christian swing band called the W's back in the 90s. And
Hmm.
they had a song called The Devil Is Bad. And she played it for me, and I fell in love with the music, and started listening to Five Iron Frenzy and the Supertones and all these Christian ska bands and punk rock bands, um I started really getting into that, but so sports kind of started to fade out, especially because I wasn't able to play. I was more just participating with the coaches,
Hmm.
uh and and I was starting to pick up drawing and doodling and doing drawing cartoons and stuff, and taking after my brother in that way, because he's a phenomenal artist, and I was just kind of poking around with it and drawing, Snoopy and Looney Tunes and stuff like that. And then I broke my arm, and so with the way my disease works, I wasn't able to get full strength back to my right arm, which was my dominant hand.
Hmm.
And so I again was like starting to do that less and less and drawing less and less. Um, but at the same time, I was listening to this music and starting to go to concerts. I mean, God bless my sweet mom would take me to these concerts at water parks and
Uh-huh.
places, churches and stuff, and she would sit in the back and let me go up front and dance around and stuff, and
That's awesome.
yeah, and so that just kind of became more and more a part of my DNA. And in high school, I had a a history project where one of the options was to write a song. So I asked my one of my best friends, Danny, to write it with me. He had just started learning to play guitar, and so we wrote a song about Gandhi, and lo and behold, for the next, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, we played music together,
That's
with
awesome.
friend Zach. And so yeah, it's like you said, there's so many things there that, oh, I'm not strong enough to play sports anymore, right? That I feel like that's being taken away, or oh, I broke my arm, I can't draw like I wanted to. being taken away. And that you could see it that way, but it's more like, well, actually, I think God's got something more here. He's got, or
Yeah.
something different,
Something
and
different. Yeah.
yeah. And even with music, I still love playing music with those guys and jamming with other friends. But I um, really found my heart in writing books and
Yeah.
actually writing books with friends, which I think really comes from that music background of saying, well, I love to create, but
Yeah.
I don't want to do it alone. So how do we do that? And the Lord just opened those doors to say, well, you can write
Yeah.
books with friends who illustrate or co-write or different things like that. And, so I just feel like as we look throughout our life, we can see seasons that seem to be ending, but there's parts of them that we get to take with us, and they form who we are, 20, 30 years later.
Yeah. And here you are talking about from the beginning, all of your siblings, and you were storytellers, and you had this immense connection with other people in and out of your home. And I'm sitting here, if you don't know what it's like when you're podcasting, I'm staring at not at Kevan because I'm listening with God, but what I am looking at is this static picture instead of him that he has there. And let me just kind of describe it to you. It's a picture of someone walking with a walking stick, and then a picture of someone with a wheelchair kind of on their back. And it represents something we're going to be talking about soon, about where some of his friends helped him get places he never could have gone on his own. And as I'm staring at this picture, I'm so glad that I'm not looking at you right now, Kevan. No disrespect, but the whole time you were talking, I was like, that's it. That's it. Like God is using you and your creativity and your storytelling heart to let people know that community is important for everyone. And with community, you can do things you might not be able to do on your own. And that is the theme already of your story.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's kind of cool to be looking at like a pictorial view of it as you were
Mm,
talking. And it's a very simple picture. It's kind of like almost like stick person version. But isn't that the way I feel like God talks, right? I always say I feel like God is a poet. He uses
mm,
the least amount of words to convey the deepest, most powerful things.
mm. It does. Yeah. And so often that is through relationships and through
Yeah.
the small decisions made in those relationships.
Yeah.
And I to go back to my childhood, you know, the as we invited people into our home or we went out into the world, um, what I noticed looking back now is that our uh, disabilities, our needs became normal to the people around us. And
Yeah.
then they started making those small decisions to be involved and say, oh, I could give you a ride somewhere. I've got my license now. I can drive your van. Or, oh, how about I cut up that food for you? And
Hmm.
or your parents have to go out for a while. How about I just come over and we'll watch a movie so you're not alone? Um and it's those small decisions um that we get to see the love of Christ comes through.
Yeah.
And then as well in the midst of that, I have a lot of small decisions to make uh
Hmm.
as that happens to invite people in and to accept their their
Yeah.
offers. And in the midst of them taking care of me, how can I take care of them? And something I've been thinking a lot about recently is uh, that you know God's gonna use those moments to bless and serve not just me but them as well. Um,
Hmm.
so my intentionality with those small decisions, uh, it's not in order to make sure God blesses them. It's just to ensure that I get to participate in that blessing. You know, uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I
like
wrote down when you were saying it, I wrote you kept saying the word decisions, and I wrote they're not decisions, they're opportunities.
yeah, yeah, and it's opportunities to
Yeah.
be part of something that I believe God's gonna do regardless.
Yeah.
It's do you want to be part of it or miss it? You know.
Exactly. I spend a lot of time with younger people. I don't know why. They just flock to me. People in the 18 to like mid 20s. And you're making me think of, we pray before we start. We ask God to drop things in our spirit. And you're making me think of this example that it's just that you get this opportunity to be part of something bigger that's important, that has value, right? And
Mm,
so this young man was talking to me. He kind of had like a foot in the world and a foot in the church and faith. And he really had a heart for God, but he was struggling. And we were talking about something he was struggling with. And I said, look, let me put it to you like this. The Bible says that we're all going to have work to do like in eternity. And
mm,
you've accepted Christ. That's awesome. So let me just ask you this. What do you want your job to be for eternity? Do you want to be the janitor or do you want to have a really cool job? And that's what just popped into my head. I haven't thought about that in years, but that's the thing. I feel like when we step into the opportunities that God gives us here that bring us this abundance, this connection, this community, it's not only about now. It's about forever. It's
yeah.
about how our heart is growing and how we're becoming more like Jesus. We can all say, "Hey, no, that's too hard for me," or "No, I don't want to chance that." You know what? We all get opportunities like that every single day. But
Mm,
we were given the task to share the gospel. And
mm,
if we know it and we know that it's true, how dare we not share it every chance we get, even when
yeah.
it's hard, even when it's scary? And so, wow, God is just really preaching over here, isn't he?
Well,
um,
and it stretches those muscles, right?
yes.
The more that we
Yeah.
do it, the more that we I know Johnny Erickson Tada talks a lot about gratitude and starting with gratitude, and
Yeah.
it's in order to make that the most active muscle in your soul, you know, like to
Yeah.
praise the Lord, to thank Him for things, and when things aren't good, to go to Him first. And if we stretch those muscles, and
Yeah.
if we put others before ourselves, like a few people said in the Bible, you know, Paul,
Yeah.
Jesus, John,
Yeah.
Peter, take
Yeah.
your pick.
Yeah.
But if we put others before ourselves, even in the midst of others taking care of us,
Yeah.
if we can say, great, I'm going to turn my attention on them, or
Hmm.
how can my needs serve them in a odd kind of paradoxical way. If we put that first and we stretch those muscles, then it
Yeah.
becomes easier and easier. Uh, and you know, at the same time, we have to take up our cross daily, and so
Yeah.
in some ways it's easier. In some ways, it continues to be a thing that we wrestle out. But you know, I'm reminded of Dallas Willard talks about, you know, we have eternity, we have heaven to look forward to, and at the same time, uh, like we can have kingdom living right now. Like
That's right.
we can live into that right now, in this present mortal coil. You know,
Yeah.
um, we can walk closer to Jesus. We can love others and put them
Yeah.
first, and live like He called us to, and what He created us for in the first place.
That's right. And even the way God created our brains, right? He created this neural network and he says you
Mhm.
can choose a blessing or a curse. And if you choose a blessing, you choose to look for the things that are good, even if something is a bad circumstance. You look for the good things. The more you travel that road in your brain, the deeper the groove gets and the more expectant you become for good things.
Mm.
And conversely, it happens the same way if you choose to be negative about everything, that's what you're going to expect. And so the more that we trust him and the more we step into these opportunities, our brain is even in its fallen state is in agreement with, okay, good things are going to happen, and the more that we step into the fact that he's good and start living that way, it's an abundant life. It really
Mm,
is.
yeah, it really is. I was talking with a friend the other day, my wife and I, we were talking with a friend who is kind of, he's the epitome of a prayer warrior.
Hmm.
I mean, he walks our city and prays for it, and people know him by that. But he was using the term praying expectantly. Like
Mm,
when you pray about things, you pray not necessarily saying, God, I'm going to ask you to do this, and I know you're going to, but you're praying expecting for God to do something, and
amen.
and
Amen.
that what He's going to do is bigger and better than what we have in mind, as
That's right.
good as that may be. And I think uh, that is the case in prayer, but that can also just be the case in our daily walk in our daily lives. And yeah, I just think if we again practice those steps and we stretch those muscles, that's what we end up living in, and it's a really beautiful thing.
It is. And, I've talked to, unfortunately, a number of people who think that being a Christian is a boring life. And I'm like, you're doing it wrong. It's just doing it wrong. And you
Yeah.
can just tell when somebody's enamored with Christ, when they know that they've received mercy, when they know what it's like to spend intimate time with him and to be loved perfectly. You can see the overflow, you can see the joy, you can see the radiance. And even though I can't see you right now, you can hear it too,
Mm.
you
Thank
know.
you. Yeah.
Now I'm going to consolidate a little bit because we got
Sure.
off on a track that God took us on and all good stuff. But you had told me that when you were in college, uh, you ended up volunteering to do these Bible studies, and you were allowed to come to the chapel. And you ended up doing an internship in Arkansas and you started applying for jobs, but you realized it was going to be difficult because you were considered a hostage risk because these were Bible studies in jail, correct?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that? Unfortunately, that's a shame because that I have always wanted to go do Bible study in prison. I think that's the most amazing thing. So I'd love to hear about this.
Yeah. Well, and it's something that uh, when I bring up, I don't bring it up out of bitterness. I get it. And I'm sure, and my wife and I were talking about this the other day, that I'm sure if I had continued to dig, I could have found, um, a program within a specific program within a specific prison that would allow
Hmm.
me to work. But I did some volunteer work at a minimum security prison. I mean, the kind where the guys are going to be getting out soon, so they're on work leave. The gate is open because nobody's trying to escape or anything, and
Right.
very very low security. And I got to volunteer there doing Bible studies, and then that was a program that um, a lot of people were part of, but then I got to know the chaplain and got permission to actually come back another day for their Friday morning chapels, which was not typically open to the public, but I just the Lord gave me favor there to be a part of that, and I got to do an internship in Arkansas with a prison ministry there that was working with guys that were about to get out and kind of help them get reacclimated to society and everything, and go through, uh, you know, um, what kind of husband am I going to be? What kind of father? What's my work ethic going to look like? Working through finances and things
That's
like that.
awesome.
And yeah, it was a really wonderful experience. And really thankful for that. And after that, I started kind of putting my application out there, trying to find a job at a prison, and applied to a few places. And the overall consensus was that because of my disability, I couldn't defend myself, and so that really limited my um,
Mm,
potential and possibilities within the prison system,
yeah.
which again at first seems discouraging, but even then the Lord opened a door to a ministry in North Carolina where I was living at the time, and it was started by a group of reformed bikers that had come to know Jesus and um, just turned their lives around. And they had started a drug rehab facility uh, for guys, and the majority of guys that went through it actually were coming to it from prison. So they would their sentence would be uh, lessened because they're going to this rehab. So it may
Hmm.
not have been behind bars, but I was still working with the same kind of guys that I wanted to work
Yeah.
with, and so that was really wonderful, and I did that for a few years, and uh, and that was great. But then the Lord led me to Indiana, to Fort Wayne, where I live now, and this was probably 12 or 13 years ago.
Hmm.
And I actually kind of went back to my roots of recording and mixing. So I did a lot of podcast and radio editing. Um,
Hmm.
so this feels very natural to me to be
Yeah.
on here.
Yeah.
Um, but I did that for a few years, and then not to jump too far ahead. If you want to go back, we can talk more. But
No, you're going exactly where I was going to jump
okay,
because
yeah,
this is the part because I still want to, get into a little bit about time with your wife as well as writing your
yeah,
book. But
yeah.
this time here, this is like exactly what we were talking about earlier about this culmination of relationships and community and
Hmm.
doing for one another. So why don't you tell us, you had some friends who wanted to kind of help you try to do some things that were new that you wouldn't be able to do without a wheelchair, and it got everything going. It's funny. I just want to stop for 1 second. We talk about, well, this door closed and this door closed and this door closed, but I see God just so clearly putting, and here's the next pin on the map, and here's the next pin. Like he's
Hmm.
directing from place to place to place. And it makes total sense to me looking back. It's why we
Yeah.
look back that he was preparing you for each next thing. But let's get into these friends and this idea of going places that you would never be able to go on your own.
Yeah. Well, and before we go there, although it's a segue to it, it's we've been using this term of doors opening and closing, and as we were talking about that just now, I had this image came to my mind of maybe maybe we are using the wrong term, and I don't mean you and I mean
Hmm.
most of society when we talk
Hmm.
about doors opening and closing. Maybe with the Lord, it's not so much a closing of a door, but that we are on a stepping stone, and He places another one in front of us, and
Yeah.
it's like, all right, it's time to step onto the next stone, and then here's the next one. And so often
Yeah.
we think of stepping from one stone to the other, we think of it as leaving that one behind, but it's more like, no, that was
No.
that was
I
it here and here and here.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that because for me, I see everything in seasons
Mm,
and that kind of goes together. And I always say, like, sometimes you don't understand what God's doing in the season that you're in.
Mm,
But when you look at it, when you pull back and look from his perspective, it's almost like if you were baking a cake, right? And each season was an ingredient. Maybe you don't particularly care for like the icky egg season or the very
mhm,
dry flour season, but you really like that sugar season or that milk
mhm,
season. But when he puts it all together and then he bakes it in the fire, something comes out, and that thing, in this particular analogy, the cake, you're able to feed people with it. And so,
mm,
like, this stepping stone goes right along with that, here's the next thing and here's the next thing. And, sometimes some of them are ones that you're like, what am I doing here? But, when you look back, it's so cool. And it's like an Ebenezer, really.
mhm. It
Yeah.
is.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
Look what happens
So
when you pray before you talk.
it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Okay, so tell us about this time, this adventure of going places you could never go in a
Yeah.
wheelchair.
Well, yeah. So right as around the time I was moving to Indiana, some friends in North Carolina, we decided that we would kind of as my last hurrah there, we would explore the sewers under one of our nearby towns, and
Hmm.
um, and that obviously sewers are not wheelchair accessible, and
Yeah.
so we made a very makeshift backpack, and they took me down into the sewers, and we had a gross and glorious time, um, as as boys do,
Uh-huh.
and it was awesome, but uh, from that, we kind of came out saying, "Well, we survived that. What else can we do?" And
Hmm.
um, and about a year later, I reached out to a few of those guys and pulled in a few others and said, "I've always wanted to go to Europe, but I know that the things that I want to do there, a lot of it is accessible, but the things I specifically want to do aren't going to be wheelchair friendly. Um,
Hmm.
so what if we made a better backpack and
Hmm.
we went to Europe? And so in 2016, a handful of guys and I we we got on a plane in Atlanta and left my wheelchair in the van, and we flew to France, and we explored France, England, and Ireland, and we did it all with a backpack that we had designed for me, and they took turns carrying me for 3 weeks, and
Wow.
we just had this unbelievable experience um, of not having to worry about. At this time, I guess I was 30 years old, and so for the first time in my life in 30 years, we could decide where we wanted to go just because that's where we wanted to go, not because
Yeah.
it was accessible or it was this or that or oh we can't go there, there's steps there or whatever.
Yeah.
We hopped over fences in England in the countryside, we
Yeah. Yeah.
um we climbed uh the however many, there's probably, I don't know, a few hundred steps up Sacre Coeur in Paris, up to the Basilica of the Sacred Heart, and climbed an island off the coast of Ireland, where there's a very, very old ancient monastery at the top. We
Hmm.
could go anywhere and do anything that we wanted, and
That's
within
amazing.
within legal limits.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess we still had some parameters. But
Yeah.
um, and the best part of it was that we got to do it together. That this was
Yeah.
a
That.
really sweet expression of friendship and of the love of
Hmm.
God.
No, I absolutely love that. If now this is going to be really hard, but if you could only use one word to describe what that felt like, what would it be?
Free.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I don't say that, I've had to clarify this before. I don't say that to say, well, a backpack is better than a wheelchair,
Yeah.
because um in my wheelchair, I get to decide where I go on my
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
now there are limits to where that may be, but I don't have to say, hey, can we turn this way? Can we go this way?
Hmm.
I don't have to think, well, I want to go here, but Philip doesn't, or Philip wants to go here, but I don't. We went.
Right.
Um, uh, it was not, even though they were carrying me on their back, it was not all about me. Um,
Right.
but I wouldn't want it to be also, as a side note. So yeah, I think that there are benefits to wheelchairs and there's benefits to backpacks and various other devices.
Yeah.
Each one has its own perk, but I think um, for this experience, it was a really awesome um,
Yeah.
opportunity to exercise those muscles that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It exercised a lot of trust, and these guys proved trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it exercised a lot of um, spirit of adventure that we got to dive deeply into and be part of things that um, I wouldn't have ever been a part of otherwise,
Yeah.
and really probably most of these guys wouldn't have been a part of otherwise. And
Yeah, adventure sounds like a good word. Like I just pictured you being kind of certain times things that you had never done before. Like you talked about hopping fences, like having somebody hop a fence with you on their back. Like must have like really felt like exciting,
oh
something that had
yeah,
never happened before. And
yeah,
maybe even a little scary at the same time, but aren't those the best combos?
yeah,
And I don't know, free seems like a good word. I was picturing you very kind of like enjoying it in a childlike wonder,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great.
Well, that's wonderful. So I love how God works in our stories. So you next went to China. You had to get a visa. You had to be invited. And you ended up going to a care center for kids with special needs. And that is where you met Katie, who is now
Mhm.
your wife. She was on staff there. Tell us a little bit about that time.
Yeah, so like you said, we had to get a visa to China. You have to be invited, and so we had connected with an organization that had a care center for orphans with disabilities in China, and it was there was an American organization that was funding the work that they were doing, and so kind of we met this person and then met this person and then kind of got there eventually to be invited and everything. And we went again for 3 weeks because we figured out that was a good amount of time. We could take our time and um, have the adventures that we wanted to and not feel rushed, but also if it's a 21-day trip at about day 19 or 20, we're all ready to go home. And so we get to push through that last day or two. And so it just felt like the right amount of time. And it was a really uh neat experience because we got to experience the kind of the countryside of China and kind of the everyman life. And then we also went to a very old city. And then from there, we went to Beijing, which is a very modern kind of
Hmm.
big place and kind of overwhelming in some great ways. But the Olympics have been there. Like it's pretty
Yeah.
modern and cool. So we got to experience these different aspects of China and then also go to the Great Wall and the Shaolin Temple where Kung Fu is kind of born in China and um, in that culture. And so also where Kung Fu Panda lives, but he wasn't there at the time. So, but yeah, part of our trip there, because we had been invited by this care center, part of our trip was that for a week we would actually stay at the care center. We would
Hmm.
live in the dormitory upstairs, and we'd go out during the day and sightsee and things like that. But then we would come back and we'd play with the kids and spend time with the staff and everything. And so Katie was working there at the time, and she had actually just moved there a few months prior to work there, and she was training the caregivers on her background is in um, trauma informed attachment based care, and so
Mm-hmm.
how do you help a child heal from trauma through relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was working with these nannies and nurses and caregivers uh, to do that with these children who may not be verbal, or they may be
Yeah.
deaf or blind or have cerebral palsy or whatever the case may be. And so really thinking outside the box and in how
Mm-hmm.
to institute these ideas. And she's wonderful at it. I love that about her. And I could rave about that forever. But she was put in charge of us that week to translate for us and take us out to see sights and just be with us. And by the end of the week, I turned to my friend Ben, who was my roommate here in Fort Wayne back then. I turned to him as we got in the car to leave, and I said, "I've never met anyone like her."
Mm-hmm.
And and he and I both kind of thought about that, like that meant something. But we're
Yeah.
boys, so we just shrugged and moved on. Um, but really, I she and I stayed in touch um, and just became closer and closer. And over the next few months, there were things where I had a speaking engagement come up where I really needed prayer. I felt a lot of spiritual warfare happening, and
Mm-hmm.
she was who I I asked to pray, and she had
Yeah.
some things going on at the care center and needed to process it, and so she reached out to me, and so we were already starting to kind of, have these roots coming together until a mutual friend who lives in Nashville basically realized that when she talked to either of us, we talked about each other the whole time. And
Mm-hmm.
so she said, I think there's something here. And so that's kind of, I guess, a year after we met, we started dating. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then a year after that, we got married in 2020.
That's awesome. And we have to consolidate it, but you guys had to have your first date in Australia was the closest you could get, which I thought was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I love that you had a friend that was a good enough friend to be like, hey, wait a minute, I see something here, and actually speak life into
Hmm.
that. As you were speaking, God took me back to your analogy of the stepping stones. And I wrote right when you were talking about China, if you hadn't stepped on that stone, you'd never be where you are now.
Yeah, yeah. And that,
And
I can't
how
imagine.
easy, right? How easy to be like, you know what? I've done a lot. I've done so many things and I've gotten to have all these experiences and, you could have just stopped there.
Mm,
But you'd already had a taste of what it was like to continue on an adventure and to listen for God. I mean, I think we're skipping over that part, right? But it's pretty obvious like you're hearing God's
mm,
promptings as you're going along. And
yeah.
um we really know his voice when we've spent that intimate time with him and when
Mm,
we trust him, even if something doesn't make a lot of sense and we find out later, oh, you had this in store for me. And
hmm.
what a beautiful gift. So I'm sure that that's something that has been a wonderful blessing. I want to move on now. I would give you lots of time to talk about Katie because we did that in our pre-recording call, but I want to move on to your book. So, um, you wrote a book, kind of based on this idea of all of this beautiful community called We Carry Kevan, about your experiences with your friends, getting you from place to place without your wheelchair. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Yeah, it's really just the chronicling of primarily that trip to Europe. When we were getting ready to go on the trip, I had written a few books and self-published, and I kind of done that on the side. But when we were getting ready to go on the trip, a good friend of mine who is uh, an editor for books, and he is someone that I really admire as a writer and an editor. He said, "Are you going to write a book about this?" And I said, I don't know, maybe. He said,
Hmm.
"Well, if you do, I'll edit it for you." And so I said,
Oh,
"Well,
awesome.
I guess I'm writing the book." So I journaled through the trip and kept records, and we made a documentary. So I have a lot of footage to work off of with the memories, um
That's awesome.
and wrote this book that is centered around the trip to Europe, but it ties in a bit of the experiences from childhood and everything,
Hmm.
and then touches on China, although it was published prior to Katie and I being together. So that's
Yeah.
no lovey-dovey, but but she is in there. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome. It's very inspiring, and we had talked about doing a giveaway. You actually then wrote another book after that with someone, which ties right back into our community and, this kind of duality of doing life together, which I'd love you to talk about briefly as well.
yeah. Well, after I wrote We Carry Kevan, which was the name of our kind of campaign to go to Europe,
Hmm.
we after I wrote that book, uh, people said, "Well, this is great, but um, how do you do this? How do you invite people in?"
Mm.
And I realized, this is a book about 3 weeks of my life, and kind of high flying adventures. But I have guys that come and get me up every day, every morning. And
Hmm.
I've been on road trips with various friends, and I played in the band, and I grew up
Hmm.
in this really wonderful, unique home situation, and with my creative parents, and so I realized, well, that may be 3 weeks, but I want to write a book that um, honors and puts on display the rest of my life,
Hmm.
and kind of the everyday, the quieter moments, and honors those friendships and my family, and so I just started. I also didn't feel like I could write a how to, 10 steps to making friends kind of thing, but I thought, well, I can share more of my story, and people
Right.
can find, maybe they can find inspiration and maybe some answers through
Hmm.
that. And so I just started putting together um, memories, just writing memories from throughout my life of where I had seen my need, my physical need, actually bring deeper relationship and fellowship with others
Hmm.
and with the Lord. And
Hmm.
so yeah, it's called the hospitality of need. And
Hmm.
and it's this idea that within our needs there can be a sense of hospitality that we can step into together. Um,
Yeah.
and there are our needs are not they don't have to be limitations. They don't have to be burdens. They can actually be opportunities to
Yeah.
heal and grow together. And so that's kind of where the book came from. And as I was writing it, I was noticing, because a lot of the book came out of me saying, well, like we were talking about earlier, well, the Bible talks about putting others before yourself.
Hmm.
But how do you do that when your needs are at least more obvious, or
Yeah.
maybe more time consuming, or more demanding in some ways? And
Hmm.
um and I couldn't find, I'm being facetious here, but I couldn't find anywhere in the Bible where it says put others before yourself, unless you know, it doesn't say
Yeah.
unless you have to go to the bathroom or
Yeah.
unless you have to,
Yeah.
and so I thought, well, there must be, that's the reality. We all have needs. So how do we put others first when we do
Hmm.
have needs? And I'd started noticing first off, I'd started noticing examples of Jesus using his human needs because he was fully God and fully man.
Hmm.
And so I saw him using his human needs to care for others. And the first and maybe most clear, prominent example would be the woman at the well, that
Yeah.
their conversation started with, "Hey, can you give me a drink?" And
Yeah.
can you imagine if he had started with any other part of the conversation? If he had started with, "If you knew who I was,"
Hmm. Hmm.
or you've had four husbands, and the guy you're with isn't your husband.
Hmm.
That would not have gone well.
Yeah.
But this woman who was um, in a very tough spot of life, it seems,
Hmm.
and probably didn't trust men very much, I'm guessing.
Hmm.
And or whatever the case may be, um, Jesus was thirsty, and he knew that asking her for a drink would
Hmm.
actually save her life.
Hmm.
And so I started kind of digging more into that and looking for more of those stories, more of those examples. And
Hmm.
I invited my friend Tommy Shelton, who is a pastor down in Tampa, Florida. Uh, I've always really appreciated his preaching and his reverence to scripture and also his sense of humor and um, his way of thinking. And so I called him up and asked him if he would write those parts of the book with me because I wanted to give
Hmm.
these examples of Jesus
Hmm.
throughout the book. So really, it's a mix of my own story and the story of Jesus. And yeah, I think I hope that it's something that people are really encouraged by and challenged by, to look at their needs and the needs of others
Hmm.
differently,
Yeah.
and in a way that could lead to a fuller life, like we were talking about earlier, what God
Hmm.
had called us to in the first place.
Yeah, amen. And I would love to do a giveaway of both books. We'll talk about that. You let me know. I
Yeah.
just think they both have so much value, and God always ends up giving the book to just the right person every single
Mhm.
time. I've been giving giveaways when episodes air from authors since the beginning of this podcast for like 5 years, and never once has somebody not really been supposed to get that book. Um,
Mhm.
and that's just a really fun thing to get to do. Now, I could probably get a cup of coffee and keep on talking for hours because, but in light of time, I have one more question I want to ask you. I always end the podcast with this question. Not that we can go back, but that someone listening could apply the wisdom of your answer to their life today. So, if you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Mm. I was thinking earlier, as I was talking about childhood, that there was another part that I wanted to share, and I think it ties into this really well. And that is when I was 6 years old, I grew up in the church. I was there probably the week after I was born, like that. That's just how my family is. And
Uh-huh.
my dad's always been a deacon at the churches that we've been at, and mom is involved in the Sunday school and the women's ministry, and so I grew up in the church. But when I was 6 years old, I was having trouble sleeping because I couldn't wrap my head around eternity, and I thought that I should be able to.
Hmm.
And and my dad sat me down on his bed one night, and instead of explaining eternity to me or trying
Hmm.
to,
Hmm.
he instead introduced me to who I could spend eternity with, and that
Mm,
was Jesus. And
mm,
even though I had heard the stories and I knew the stories, that's when it became my own. That's when it became real to me. And throughout my life, um, what I have seen um, over the years is that um, people will um, will fail you, and jobs will disappoint you, and
mm-hmm,
projects will fall apart, and living
mm-hmm,
situations will change, and
mm-hmm.
all of this, and yet Jesus has been the constant. He has been
Yeah.
the part that hasn't changed and has always been by my side, and
Mm-hmm.
in the most fun and wonderful of times, and in the deepest, darkest times. And there have
Yeah.
been some very, very dark um, times, and yet Jesus has
Mm-hmm.
been there, and sometimes in those moments, he's all I've got to cling to.
Yeah.
And so I would say, um, I'm looking back, if the present day me could say anything to that 6-year-old, would be,
Mm-hmm.
um, remember this. Like Jesus is going to be with you through it all.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
awesome. And
yeah,
honestly, really powerful that you have a dad wise enough to have answered that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
And I think, that's something that Jesus has been the constant, is something that I get to realize over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So the only reason I would give that as advice to my younger self is so that my eyes will be open to it and be looking
Mm-hmm.
for it, rather than having to
Yeah.
be reminded the hard way,
Yeah.
but maybe that's a good thing too. So I don't.
Yeah. Well, that's an awesome answer, and I just want to thank you for taking the time today to share with us your story, and I think your story has been a really great example of just that you were never alone.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild and wonderful ride, and
Yeah.
we'll see where the Lord takes us from here.
Yeah, that's the best thing about God. He always likes to do a new thing. So there's another stepping stone coming any day now.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day, and go be grateful.